Please welcome to the stage healthcare reporter for Crain's New York business, Amanda D'Ambrosio.
Hi there, everyone. Just make sure you can hear me correctly. My name's Amanda D'Ambrosio. I'm a healthcare reporter with Crain's New York business, and I cover healthcare and public health issues in the city and state. I'm looking forward to leading this panel of state and nonprofit experts today. It's going to talk about the quick changing federal landscape when it comes to nutrition assistance and food insecurity in New York State. So there's lots of changes that my team and I have been covering stemming from the federal administration. I know you're all aware of the impending SNAP cuts, which are quickly approaching and are slated to affect tens of thousands of New Yorkers. Our state leaders today are going to walk us through how big those cuts are going to be, what the impact is, how they are preparing behind the scenes, and what exactly is the remaining safety net that New Yorkers have to rely on. So I'd love to take a moment to welcome our panelists to the stage. I'm going to give our panelists the floor to introduce themselves, but I'll just quickly announce them. First, we have Sherry Tomasky, who is the SNAP Bureau Chief in the state's Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. We have Tim Pezzolesi, the Director of Agricultural Development in the state's Office of Agriculture and Markets. And we have Andrés Vives, who's the Executive Director of Hunger Solutions New York. So I'll give you all just a few minutes to introduce yourselves. Andrés, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? So yes, I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Hunger Solutions New York. We're a statewide nonprofit organization dedicated to ending hunger. We work on policies and programs, connecting folks to different programs, in addition to strengthening policies that on these federal programs.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sherry Tomasky. I am a SNAP Bureau Policy Chief at the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance in Albany. Our state agency and our bureau specifically oversees the administration of the SNAP program in New York State. SNAP is a state-supervised, county-administered program, meaning that the state provides the oversight and the management of the program, but it is implemented at the county level throughout New York State. Our bureau also oversees contracting for SNAP outreach and SNAP education programming, as well as the summer EBT program, all of which I think we'll touch on today.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tim Pezzolesi. I'm the Director of Agricultural Development at the Department of Agriculture and Markets. I've been with the department about 20 years, and most recently my new role as the Agricultural Director is where I've found the intersection of food health, food access, really an encouraging and exciting time. The amount of collaboration that I see is very encouraging. The division that I oversee has 5 teams. There's a business development team, a marketing and promotion team, a food and nutrition team, and a food systems resiliency team. I want to quickly introduce 2 members of that team that are here, Kate Fulham and Kendall Ho, who are, thank you, please wave your hands or stand up. They'll be the ones that correct me later or answer other questions. But they work with our Council on Hunger and Food Policy, the statewide effort that's really at the forefront of assessing issues and developing policy and solutions to some of the things we're talking about today. So looking forward to this discussion.
Thanks, everyone. There's a lot to cover, so we're going to get right into it. But just a brief note, we're going to hold about 10 to 15 minutes for audience Q&A at the end of the session. You should all have some slips of paper and pens, hopefully, to write questions, and folks will be coming around to collect them for the end of our time. So let's get right into it. So Andre, you talked a little about how your organization oversees hunger prevention here in New York. Can you talk about your biggest concerns stemming from the federal policy changes that are coming?
Well, this budget reconciliation bill, right, passed this summer, it includes the largest cuts to the SNAP program in American history. It's an estimated $187 billion over the next 10 years that will be cut from the program. That cut will have real consequences, and you heard David earlier, for nearly 3 million New Yorkers. These are folks who rely on SNAP to put food on the table, many of which are children, seniors, people with disabilities, our veterans. We're especially concerned about changes to SNAP eligibility for immigrants as well. About 41,000 refugees and asylees in New York could be at risk of losing SNAP entirely if they do not have legal permanent resident status. We're also concerned about the impacts of the expanded work reporting requirements. So those put a 3-month time limit on SNAP access over a 36-month period. And that will limit SNAP access for hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers. So because of H.R. 1, we'll have older adults with children 14 and older, people who are homeless, youth aging out of foster care, who will now be subject to that work requirement, that time limit. At the same time, H.R. 1, it also makes it harder for states to step in, and I'm sure Sherry will talk more about this, to support families because the bill is shifting significant SNAP costs onto state budgets. And that's not all. It's bad. It's not just the SNAP cuts. There are cuts to Medicaid and other basic needs programs that are going to make it really difficult for states, but it's also going to put further strain on low-income families' budgets. Here in New York, obviously advocates and state agencies are going to do everything we can to minimize the harm, but without a doubt, these cuts will increase hunger. And then couple that with the fact that very recently, USDA announced that they will end the collection and reporting of food security data. So it's hard to imagine they would make that decision if they knew that food security would improve, right? And so, attempts, I'll end with this. The attempts to obscure the impacts won't change the reality that food insecurity will increase across this nation.
Thanks for outlining that for us, Andre. Sherry, I'd love for you to dive into a little bit deeper about the SNAP cuts specifically. But first, I want to start with some news that came out this morning. The USDA has directed state and regional SNAP directors not to send funding for next month to EBT vendors who deliver those benefits. Can you elaborate on what New York has received in terms of communications?
Yes. So last Friday, late in the day, I had a bet going with one of my colleagues on Friday morning. I said, okay, it's the Friday of a 3-day holiday weekend. What's the odds that we're going to get a big memo at 4 o'clock today? So we took our bets, and we were both wrong because it was 5 o'clock and not 4 o'clock on Friday, for the record. The memo that came across instructed states to hold their benefit files for November issuances. And until further guidance could be issued about the ability or not of the federal government to meet the November benefit requirement, they don't want EBT vendors to have those files in order to process them. This gets a little technical because once the file is transmitted to the vendor, it sort of goes on autopilot, and it's really hard to stop it and to pull it back. So it's a lot easier to not give those payment files to the vendor than it is to give them the file and then have to pull them back for whatever reason. I don't want to diminish the significance of this, but there were still several days before New York would even begin to send payment files for the month of November. That would probably begin in a little less than a week from now. So there are a few days for the state to discuss what some of its options are, to ask clarifying questions of the federal government, and to hopefully receive some further information from USDA. You know, the states can adapt pretty quickly once the shutdown ends and the government reopens. I think the bigger issue is that there's a shutdown with questionable funding about the benefits to begin with. What day we send our files sort of isn't really at the heart of this. It's really about, will there be funding available to pay those benefits in November, and that is something that we have to rely almost entirely on the federal government to tell us.
Yeah, it's an interesting time because the government shutdown is really compounded with the incoming work requirements that are going into effect. I saw some reporting that could move up for New York as opposed to early next year. The state might have to prepare for those to go into effect as soon as November. So can you talk a little bit about what it means for these two events to be occurring at the same time and how the agency is preparing?
Sure. I can talk just very broadly and briefly about how the state is implementing the ABOD work requirements and the 3-month time limit. Once H.R. 1 passed in July, our agency knew that this would be coming and did begin at that time to prepare for our ABOD waiver to be rescinded and also to prepare to bring districts up to speed on what needs to be done in order to implement a policy around the ABOD time limit. So there were certain things that are sort of known in this space about what would need to be done and what districts would need to know. So that guidance was being pulled together while waiting for a federal update with specifics that are needed. The biggest question was whether or not the state would be allowed to continue operating its statewide waiver for ABOD through its February 28th expiration date. That was really the big question, and until the memo was issued, we really didn't know if that would be allowed or not. And so what we learned on October 3rd, which is the date the guidance was issued, is that those statewide waivers will all be rescinded within 30 days of the issuance of that memo. So that brings us to about November 2nd for when that statewide waiver would expire. And what's interesting about that date is that it allows even part of that month to be waived under our statewide waiver, which allows the entire month to we don't actually have to implement those rules until the following month. So December is actually the first month that an individual could possibly be subject to a work requirement under the ABOD regulation and have what's considered a countable month or a trackable month, whether or not they've actually met the requirement. However, there's a lot that needs to happen between now and when that occurs, which is notification for clients that are subject to this, which has now expanded beyond what it was the last time New York had experience with ABOD, and also making sure that individuals who are needing to comply, have the opportunity to do so and have the information that they need in order to do it. There's also guidance that has to be issued to the districts, as well as a lot of back-end updates around forms and training and so on and so forth, so that once the process begins, all of the pieces are in place to actually manage it. It's important to understand that most people are subject to this at their initial certification, at their recertification, or at when a change report occurs. If the household reports a change that newly subjects them to the work requirement or provides an exemption to it at that point as well. So I don't want folks to think that every single person in the state who's an ABOD has to begin working on December 1st. That's not the case. There is a phase-in, but most SNAP cases have 12-month cert periods, which puts a recert at no longer than 11 months from now. So, we really have a year before most people will come into this. And so our agency is expecting to put guidance out either this week or next week to districts. There have been a number of webinars for districts already. And some of you may have heard, but there is going to be a webinar for community partners later this week on Thursday that our commissioner, Barbara Gwynn, will be hosting. Many of you in the room may have heard about this already. I see a lot of nodding heads. If not, I can certainly help get information, but know that it will be recorded and it will be available for replay. We're also putting out a number of fact sheets and tools and resources for community organizations to really, get up to speed on what these new work requirements mean, how they're being implemented, and what they can do to help, most importantly.
Thank you. Just quickly, to zoom out for a second, Andre kind of outlined the populations who receive SNAP and who could be affected by this. I'm curious if you could just go into some of the downstream effects of some of these changes and how the state is assessing those effects.
Sure. Well, the number of individuals based on the definition of ABOD who would be newly subject to these work requirements is actually about 400,000. Not all of them would lose benefits under the policy. Many can and very well may comply. So there's sort of an upper end and a lower end of impact based on, what is reasonable to assume around compliance. The low end impact is about 250,000 folks who may lose benefits, and the upper end is about 325,000 who may lose benefits. That's based in part by what different populations, have indicated in the past, have been able to comply with work requirements. It also has a lot to do with how much flexibility the state has to exempt people from those work requirements. Those exemptions are a lot more restrictive under this particular policy. So the impact of the ABOD work requirements right now, I think, is estimated around 300,000 people. So unless there are changes, drastic to the policy, the districts, of course, will do everything they can to try to connect individuals with those opportunities for paid or in-kind work, but there will definitely be a large impact from this policy, probably more than anything else in H.R. 1. I'll echo what Andre said about the changes to the non-citizen eligibility. As he said, the state is estimating about 41,000 people would lose eligibility for SNAP under those changes if they do not have another legal status that they can fall back on. And we won't know that about an individual until they're screened. And again, that would go into effect at initial or recertification. That policy we don't have federal guidance on yet. So there are a lot of gray areas that we're trying to work out, and until the federal government issues that guidance, we have not begun implementing that particular policy change. And the last change under this particular law, H.R. 1, are changes to the amount of allowance that a household can receive to cover their utility expenses based on their household circumstances. So that isn't something that will affect eligibility as much as it would affect a household's benefit allotment, because they may no longer be eligible for this high allowance that would offset their income and allow for a higher SNAP benefit. They might be subject to a lower utility allowance based on their circumstances, and their SNAP benefit may go down as well. So we're just beginning to implement that change. It's a little hard to know until we screen every household how many will be affected by that particular policy change, but collectively, we're talking anywhere between 300,000 and 350,000 households in New York State with a direct impact of some sort based on these policy changes. And that we do expect would be fairly well known after the first year, since most households would have an initial or recertification within a year. There are some households that may not recert until 18 months from now at the most, so we could have a little bit of a longer effect for some of the households that contain older adults.
Thanks, Sherry. Tim, I'd love to kick it over to you to talk a little bit about the impacts of the federal changes on the agriculture and food retailer industry. Can you outline what you're expecting?
Sure. So I think generally speaking, within the farming community, there's also a lot of uncertainty, obviously, and questions about how things are going to play out with federal programs in general, but also with projects that have already been started. to assist. And really, there's been a lot of investment in New York regarding middle of the line distribution. So aggregation, processing, distribution, wholesale, to really help our food assistance networks flourish. So there are a lot of questions about that that we are continually working with USDA. At Agriculture Markets, we're committed to working with those partners, really to address, first of all, the really immediate questions and needs for key programs with USDA and also FDA. So animal and health issues that we want to make sure are protected, and then also on another level with food safety and broader and food access. So those are conversations that I know our staff are having daily in reaching out to our federal partners, and we stand by and committed to working through those questions. Three programs that really kind of jump out in terms of the SNAP side of things. So one, SNAP Ed. Obviously, we receive funding through Sherry's office, OTDA, on a number of fronts, so that is going to impact nutrition education. But also we have a community growers and food box program. That's a grant through Ag Markets. That's going to be affected. And together we're looking at, that's about a $30 million impact. That's fairly immediate. We have some of those projects are spending down now through 2025 with that, with the funding cease that they'll spending down until September 30th, 2026. Also, our Farmers Market Nutrition Program, which supports low-income seniors and also WIC participants. That's a really effective program. It provides currency in the form of coupons. It's $25 annually to those participants. And it's really an effective way for them to have access to fresh produce, healthy foods, and also to really get into the farmers markets and farm stands to see what's possible, to really learn more about different products and develop healthy habits. Those programs, there's 700 participating farmers markets and farm stands throughout the state. It's really become popular, and I think we're going to see an impact on that program as SNAP is affected and federal dollars are impacted. Also related to that, our Fresh Connect program, that doubles the SNAP participants' value at these farmers markets and farm stands. It's a really good way to stretch the dollars out and to increase the participation at those with not only seniors and WIC participants, but veterans and other at-risk populations. So that is a program that also is going to be impacted. We'll see, I think, higher demand and more stress on those programs as the federal impacts happen.
You talked about the federal hit that you're expecting for some of those programs. Can you talk a little bit about how the state is thinking through how to fill some of the funding gaps?
Sure. So we have, really there's been a lot of investment, I mentioned, in the infrastructure side of things. I have really a long list of programs that I could list out here that we have been investing. I think, one of the key points that we want to make today is that there is a history of collaboration. Our Commissioner Ball spoke at our Council on Hunger and Food Policy meeting recently, a couple of weeks ago, and talked about, there's a fog in DC. There's a lot of uncertainty when he met with his colleagues from other state departments of agriculture. But coming back to New York, there's a lot of certainty. There's a lot of investments that we've done in terms of our policy development and program development. I think some of the ones that I would mention that are key, we're going to continue to work through the LFPA program. Rounds 1 and 2, those are currently, those funds they've been allocated and they're being spent by grantees. So that program is going to continue to work with traditionally disadvantaged farmers and also providing increased access for underserved communities. Unfortunately, the third round of that funding has been cut or canceled by USDA. So that's a $25 million impact. that I meant to mention. And also for our Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Program, that is currently in the process of being spent. That's $13.7 million for that program. That right now, one of the things that our awardees are looking at, there's an accelerated timeline to get those projects done. So there's a lot of energy going towards that. In the next year, that program ends in 2026. So I think, you know, what we're looking to do at the state level is, I know the governor continues to prioritize food access for all New York residents, and all the agencies are working on this to look at how we can work together to address these gaps and to further strengthen the state investments in the programs that we have.
It's a good segue for us to talk a little bit about existing investments, programs that are still strong and could help New Yorkers maintain food access. And Andre, I would love to hear from you a bit about what the existing safety net is. What are the programs that help prevent hunger prevention statewide?
Yeah, well, thank you. That was a good segue. State investments, you know, they can go a long way in protecting New Yorkers, especially from these federal cuts. David mentioned earlier, universal school meals. I think that's, you know, a really good prime example. Starting this school year, about a month ago, 2.7 million students entered the school day with access to a free breakfast and a free lunch every school day. No questions asked. We're super proud of that. New York became the 9th state to do it in this country. It's a huge accomplishment. Hunger Solutions New York and Community Food Advocates co-led that effort, and we're very thankful to the New York Health Foundation for their generous support. As families face cuts to SNAP and Medicaid, knowing that their child can go to school and get a free breakfast and a free lunch every day without any paperwork, without any questions about immigration status or work hours or family income, that is a significant relief in New York State. So we're really glad that the governor included that in her budget this year. It was $340 million that it took to make this happen in New York State. And we think it's a really good investment. It helps families to stretch their grocery budgets. We estimate that it's approximately $165 per week, per month, per child. So, you know, you think about a family of 2 or 3 children, you know, $165 a month per kid. That's really big savings for a family. New York has also invested in SNAP outreach. So Hunger Solutions New York, we also operate a network of more than 80 SNAP navigators across New York State in community-based organizations through the Nutrition Outreach and Education Program, or NOAP for short. And that program is administered by OTDA. You know, now more than ever, that network is important. As Sherry was mentioning, these new work requirements and these new policies that are coming down from HR 1 are going to need a significant amount of education for households that operate these programs as folks come into recertification. Like, what do I do, right? So, you know, that network of SNAP navigators that's out there, they both assist in people in applying for the program, but can also assist folks in kind of navigating these, you know, recerts and things like that. New York, in the last couple of years, has increased funding for that program, which has enabled us to expand the program across the state and, you know, cover all counties in New York State with a body, right, that can, you know, do home visits, that can, you know, meet people where they're at, whether that be at a community location or, you know, at a, you know, enrollment fair or, you know, something like that. HR 1, though, does cut the federal portion of SNAP outreach funding in half for that program. So we are currently looking at a 50% cut to the federal portion of funds that support those 80 SNAP navigators out there. We are, encouraging the state to step in and sustain access to SNAP Navigator statewide, so we can help people understand these new program rules and maintain benefits wherever possible.
Just to shift back a little bit, you talked a lot about universal school meals. I'm curious when it comes to the next step of advocacy or how to build on that program. What are you thinking about?
So, we are, we're working on, strong implementation, right? Strong implementation of the program, in collaboration with the state education department, encouraging schools to expand their meal programming, and using the added financial stability and the staff capacity from universal school meals to do so. So talking about things like breakfast after the bell, summer and after school programs that they can operate. Also looking at documenting the impacts of the rollout across New York State, collecting stories and data on the universal school meals program. How much has this benefited your family? How much has this benefited your school? We've heard from, school food service directors who have said, I no longer have to get on the phone and call families for back balances that I know don't have it. They don't have it. And I no longer have to do that anymore. I can focus on what I do best, preparing meals for students and feeding kids. So we're looking for those stories. You can't teach a hungry child. And so, that's a really important aspect of this as well. Just supporting there's a component that came across with universal school meals, and that is a SNAP outreach component. So educating families in schools about SNAP, and which also assists the state in paying for this, as more families connected to SNAP, get picked up by the federal portion of the bill. So, I think those are the big things.
Thanks, Andre. Sherry, you talked a little bit in your opening remarks about the summer EBT program, which for now, as far as I understand, is still active. Can you talk a little bit about the impacts of this program and its future?
Absolutely, yes. So summer EBT is definitely one of the success stories this year, and we've got a lot of good news to share. So the SNAP Bureau at OTDA administers the program, and as of right now, 1.9 million children statewide have been issued their summer EBT benefits, totaling about $231 million. There is still a small group of kids that need to be paid based on being determined eligible at the very, very end of the school year or over the summer. So we'll be working on, getting those benefits out the door within the next couple of weeks or so. We expect that that'll bring us well over 2 million children, which is right in line with estimates. Our redemption this year is actually about the same as it was last year, somewhat close to about 70% or so of benefits are redeemed before they expire. We've got a very, very short timeline for these benefits to be used. It's only 122 days, and sometimes it takes the third round of notification to get, through to a household that their benefits have been issued and they don't have a lot of time left. So we really are trying to look at ways to get at those non-redeeming households. What's in their way? What kept them from knowing that their benefits were issued and how to use them? We do rely on a sort of an old-fashioned system of mailing a benefit card out to people, and it's not their SNAP card, and it's not their Medicaid card, and it's not a benefit card that they use for anything else, which I think has its advantages, but also has its disadvantages, and this may be one of them. So we're really looking this year to do a real deep dive on what is going on with households that haven't been able to connect to their benefits. Is it a chronic problem? Was it a one-year problem? And really try to put more effort into the communities and the messaging that we think really need it. But we are very proud this year of having gotten the program, up and the benefits out the door on the required time frame. 75% of all benefits were issued in the month of June in New York. Our call center was able to keep up with demand. I think that was probably our biggest win this year. If anyone remembers 2024, I think it was all about you couldn't get through to the call center. But this year we did not have that problem. We had a lot of hands on deck, and our call center operated great. And looking ahead next year, we are looking to implement some new technology that would give households a bit more of a self-service option to learn about their benefits, when they were issued, find out when they were issued so that they can understand how long they have to use them. Maybe next year or maybe the year after, we can get as deep as, where was your benefit card mailed to? Was that the right address? Here's the card that the benefits are on. And so try to get at some of those questions that families tend to have more often. And I do want to take a minute to give the Health Foundation our appreciation on behalf of the state, because they have invested in an organization called Code for America, which is doing a lot of technical assistance for New York State on the building of this self-service portal that we want to launch for families in the coming years. And it will definitely help bridge some of the gap in terms of getting timely information to people and making sure that people understand when and how they need to use these benefits. But we are continuing to beat the drum about benefits expiring, making sure that families know where they can call to get more information. So this year was a lot smoother than last year. We have a long way to go, but we really know that so many community groups helped raise awareness about the program and spread the word, and that made a big difference this year.
And Tim, you talked a little bit about some of the programs that the state's continuing to invest in on the agriculture front. But where do you see the big successes now, sort of amidst all the uncertainty?
Yeah, I appreciate that follow-up. Because I spoke generally about some of the investments, and I think it's worth noting specifically what they are and where there's going to be continued growth. So one, our Food Access Expansion Grant Program, that was awarded earlier this year. That was $10 million, and that was to 9 projects focusing on increasing retail food access for New Yorkers living in areas of without grocery stores and without options to healthy, affordable food. So that's one key investment. RFSI, I mentioned before. Another program that's a state investment, we recently awarded $8.5 million to 69 farms, food processors, and distributors through the New York State Grown and Certified Infrastructure and Technology Grant Program. So that's strengthening businesses that produce, process, or distribute New York State grown products throughout the state. There was also $2.5 million that was made available this year through the New York State Urban Farms and Community Gardens Program. So that supports projects geared towards the development and enhancement of urban farms, school gardens, and other community gardens across the state. It's really a really popular program, and seeing more and more applications coming in for that. Of course, our great innovation in the state, the Nourish New York program, which reroutes New York's surplus agricultural products to populations in need, especially through the state's emergency food network, and provides support for both farmers and food processors. So that is really the inspiration for LFPA at the federal level. Excuse me. And what we call New York Farms, our New York Farm Food for New York Families. So a lot of success there. Andre mentioned some farm-to-school needs. We have a regional school food infrastructure grant program, and that's $50 million over 5 years to support regional cooking facilities that use fresh New York State products for meal preparation K through 12. Also, the 30% initiative that provides incentive to school districts in sourcing New York products for their lunches. So it increases the reimbursement from 5.8 cents to 25 cents if they meet the threshold of 30% sourcing New York products. So that's another program that's really seeing a lot of interest and growth in across the state. Also on the farm to school side, we have farm to school grants. So that promotes the purchase of New York State grown and food produced in K through 12 cafeterias as well. So those projects focus on student health and well-being, enhancing nutritional education, and supporting farms and communities in a number of different ways, focusing on schools' needs, individual needs.
Great. We're going to open it up for Q&A in just a moment, but I'd love to end our conversation with asking you all to just share one takeaway. Amid a quickly changing federal landscape, what is your biggest focus? And what new needs do you see on the horizon that both state leaders and nonprofit leaders can fill? Andre, we can start with you.
I think, we're focusing a lot of our efforts on advocacy, so including for state investments that I mentioned earlier, like that SNAP network of navigators, or ensuring that universal school meals remains a priority. Over the last 4 years, New York State has increased WIC enrollment by over 100,000 people. And we've seen WIC agencies struggle with keeping up with that. So we are also advocating for more funds for those WIC agencies so they can support families. I heard you say Nourish New York. Nourish New York, as we see the SNAP cuts come into play, HIPNAP and Nourish New York, funding for those programs is going to become key as well. Those programs, provide funds to the emergency food providers, where we'll see families fall off of SNAP or have less with SNAP. They may be able to get some assistance through that network as well. So I think advocacy, I think, philanthropic organizations really could help. Honestly, help nonprofit organizations keep the lights on right now during a time where we're seeing contracts, federal and state-funded contracts going away. It really could help organizations like Hunger Solutions Network and like other organizations in this room to keep the lights on and to be able to do the work to advocate, to lobby against these harmful cuts.
It's easy to let all of this become overwhelming. It really is. It's easy to be overwhelmed by the magnitude of the change, the speed of the change, the consequences of the change. I think we're trying as at least a SNAP Bureau and if I may, as a state agency, to approach these changes with a level head, with a lot of thought, with the proper hands-on guidance and technical assistance that our districts need in order to implement these changes, and to do so with minimizing errors and speeding up the time limit or the timeline by which people can receive their benefits. One of the things I didn't mention earlier is that I think one of the best kept secrets going in New York is that a year or two ago, New York was being criticized for its very low timeliness rate, the rate by which applications were reviewed and approved within 30 days. But New York's application processing timeliness rate is now over 90%. And here in New York City, it's actually 92%. New York City is leading the state in timely processing of SNAP applications. And we're so incredibly proud of the work that's been done here at the city level to do that. And I think that story got eclipsed by all of these big changes coming down the pike. So even in the midst of a lot of chaos, there's a lot of good things that are still happening. There's a lot of really important work that our district partners are able to do. And we did that together in a very concerted effort over the course of 18 months to bring those timeliness rates up to where they need to be. I think we can do that with our payment errors. I think we can, make this concerted effort over the next 2 years to look at where the errors are occurring and try to eliminate those so that our payment error rates go down, and we may not incur as big of a penalty as it looks as if we may right now. But mostly, I think we have to do it with the compassion and with the level head that we need to do it to try to keep everyone moving in the same direction at the district level and at the state level and at the community level.
I don't think I could say it any better than that. It does require a level head. I think also, just go back to where we are in New York. There's really decades of collaboration. We know how between our agencies, with private foundations, with all of us to work together to find solutions. We have to be nimble. We have to assess it on a daily basis and figure out where each of our roles can be to really pull the system together. And I think that's something that's important to keep in mind as we weather these rough waves and rough waters, that we have the capacity to do it. And it's very encouraging to see and to hear these ideas and for us to come together like this and talk it through.
Great. So I want to open it up for a few questions. First question. Many immigrants are at greater risk for experiencing food insecurity. HR 1 has brought increased threats to immigrants through ICE detentions and reduced SNAP eligibility. And we know many of these immigrant New Yorkers work within the food system. How can New York State protect immigrant New Yorkers and ensure their access to healthy food?
Well, I can try to take a stab at this, and one of the things so I talked a little bit about advocacy, and Hunger Solutions is working on some different slate of policies, one of which would allow New York to support food security amid these federal cuts. Is including a state-funded food benefit program for excluded New Yorkers. The other thing is a state supplement to increase the SNAP minimum benefit in New York State. So other states have done it, but we have, we're seeing, folks that are going to be excluded from SNAP. New York State could create state-funded food benefit program for those excluded New Yorkers, and that's something that we're going to be advocating for.
That's an excellent point. I'll add that at the state level, we've really stepped up our collaboration with Office for New Americans, the Bureau of Refugee Services, which is internal to OTDA. I know that our governor's office is very focused on trying to coordinate services for non-citizens who are affected by some of these changes and making sure that the immigrant community has enhanced services within their areas to provide safety net when necessary. We're trying to be very careful about how this policy is implemented so that we're very clear not to take anyone off the rolls that doesn't, have to be by law, and making sure that every individual is screened for potential eligibility based on their documentation, and that they get assistance from the local district to obtain that when and if that's necessary. So I think that a lot of this enhanced collaboration will hopefully bring us a little closer to having a more robust safety net in communities where, immigrants are feeling scared and nervous and, are being threatened on multiple fronts. We are part of the Hunger and Food Policy Council. I do give that group a lot of credit for also making connections with organizations that provide those services on the ground in immigrant communities, and we're going to try to stay focused on that and increase our commitment to that.
Yeah, and in addition to that, the LFPA program, that's one that serves underserved areas, and so I think that's an area where we can continue to see those projects coordinate with and intersect with various communities.
Mm-hmm. I have another question about the reduced food product that's going to food pantries. Can we talk a little bit about the impact of that reduced product and potential solutions?
I don't know if any of us, can you speak more on the food pantry side? I know we can't.
So, with the Nourish program, that's something that that works with those communities. I'm not sure exactly. Could you repeat the question?
Yes, I haven't heard much about reduced food product going to food pantries. What is the impact and solutions?
Reduced food product? Reduced in what way, I guess I'm wondering. The amount of that's going towards it, or? Yeah, I mean, the whole point of, Nourish is to have excess product go to those food banks and food service areas. So I'm not exactly sure beyond that how to answer the question.
We maybe have time for one more. Is there any collaboration or cross-learning between the state's SNAP infrastructure and Medicaid on work requirements?
Yes, thank you for that question. That's something that we are very interested in doing. We have, I think, more experience with this, of course, than the Medicaid program does. They have a much larger population than we will in terms of implementing these changes, and they have a little bit of a longer runway, although not much. So yes, we are very much working on how to align these two programs from its design on down so that it benefits individuals who may find themselves, subject to it from both programs.
Great. It looks like we are at time. We're going to take next a 30-minute break, and then when we return at 3:05, we'll get a take on food insecurity from Colleen Heflin, who's a professor of public administration and international affairs at Syracuse University. And then after that, we'll have a panel of local leaders and food advocates who talk about working to improve food access in the state. Before you all get up, I'd just love if we could join me in a round of applause for Andrés, Sherry, and Tim. Thank you, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.